Hi, I'm Angela with As Above Astrology, and it is time for another prediction. So, I have, as I announced a little while back, I have been battling Lyme disease, and I cast a horary chart about this on January 25th, 2026. Um, but I've just found this chart to be like a little bit accurate, like more than I thought it would be. So I'm not trained in horary astrology yet. I have not taken my classes, so I always like question this, but I think this one is worth documenting because I am going to try and create a prediction as to how long it's going to take me to finish recovering from this. I have not gotten a good answer from, and I don't want to say good, it was a very professional answer from my doctors, but I haven't gotten like a straightforward answer because it's not really clear whether someone can make a full recovery at the point where I'm at. Um, but there's still that possibility. So I am going to attempt to fill in some of the blanks, some of the gaps with medical astrology using William Lilly's Christian astrology and some of the techniques that I have learned from other Western Renaissance astrologers along my own journey. Um, so I guess without further ado, I'm going to show you the chart that I cast, and I will just walk through this really quickly. Um, I hope you can see that. You are screen sharing. Yes, you can. Okay, good. So this chart, how long will my Lyme recovery take? When I'm casting a horary chart, the key is that it has to be personal to you. That's like number one. And then you want to boil it down to a yes no question. So the yes no question underlying how long will my Lyme recovery take is, will I recover from Lyme disease? That's the yes no question that we're answering. But I am also asking how long it's going to take. So what does this look like? The first thing that I do when I look at a chart for a medical question is I'm looking at the first house, I'm looking at the sixth house, I'm looking at the eighth house because that's the house of death, looking at the 10th house, and I'm looking at the seventh house. So there's a lot going on, right? The ascendant, the first house, is at 21 Pisces. So we know that that is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is right here in Cancer in the sign of his exaltation. So at first glance, it's like, oh, yay, but wait a second, he's retrograde, so he's afflicted. So the ascendant is me. And then in any question, your co-significator is always the moon. The moon is at 28 Aries in the first house. So those are the two planets that signify me. Then we look at the sixth house, and it is 7 Leo 37. So we know that the sun is the significator of the illness. The sun is in detriment in the sign of Aquarius in the 11th house. So that's not great. And he's also conjunct the natural significator of fevers. So I consider Mars to be, William Lilly says Mars signifies tertian fevers and pestilent burning fevers. So I consider Mars to also signify infections. So we've got the indicator of the illness separating from the natural significator of infections. But we can't see the infection because the infection is combust. So there's more going on here than just Lyme disease, is what this tells me. The significator of the illness and the natural significator of fevers and infections are also in an air sign. So it tells me that there is some kind of airborne illness that I cannot see the effects of yet going on right here. So when I look back, I have to look up when I got my test results back. In Western Renaissance astrology, we use the number of degrees that two planets are either applying or separating as a measure of how much time will pass between the predicted event and its fruition. So in this case, when a planet is within 8.5 degrees of the sun, it is said to be combust, or it's so close to the sun that the sun's magnificence and glory is burning up that planet's dignity. That planet is not visible in the sky because the sun is too bright. So we have the sun, who is the faster of these two planets, separating from Mars at approximately 4 degrees. So they have another 4.5 degrees to go until Mars is visible. So why is this significant? My test results came back. If we look at the date of this and we count forward 4.5 months, so that takes us 1 month is February 25th, 2 months is March 25th, 3 months is April 25th, 4 months is May 25th, and then let's go forward another 15 days from there. So 15 days from May 25th, May has 31 days. We're gonna go forward 6 days, that gets us to May 31st. And then we have another 4 days to go forward, which is June 4th. Okay, so that's 4.5 months. My test results came back on June 3rd. And they revealed multiple airborne co-infections along with Lyme, including strep and Epstein-Barr virus. Okay, let's keep going. Let me show you so this here, June 3rd. Those are my test results. Yeah. Now we keep going. We have to look at the 7th house. Why? The 7th house is the physician. Okay, so the 7th house is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is also combust the sun, separating, thankfully. So separating combustion is not as bad as an applying combustion. Yay. But Mercury is dignified by term, but he's combust, and he's also in the 12th house, which is the weakest house. So the doctor, while he knows his way around this, or really, the 5 doctors that I've been seeing know their way around this, they know what to do. There's not much they can do for me. And their help is further weakened by the fact that they're combust, the sun, and then 12th house, not able to do anything. That's the weakest house, and it's a malefic house. So, great. I will say that rings true with the way that this has gone. I've literally been to 5 different doctors in 6 months. Because just stuff wasn't working. So I've kind of taken matters into my own hands and combined things from every different doctor that I'm seeing, and it is working. But a lot of the protocols that I do, I came up with myself too. Probably 2/3 of what I'm doing, I came up with myself. Which takes us to the 10th house, the house of medicine. So the house of the medicine is at the cusp is at 25 Sagittarius. The 10th house is the medicine. Will the medicine be effective? That's what this question asks. And the medicine is signified by the same significator as the ascendant. So that's me. Um, kind of scary. I am the medicine in a way. And I will say that the way I have seen this play out, and this has also influenced some of my like medical decisions. So shortly after I did this horary chart, I realized I'm going to need intravenous therapies. Why did I come up with that? Because the significator of the medication is Jupiter, who rules the blood, and he's in a water sign, Cancer. So anything liquid that they can put into my veins, anything that they can do intravenously, directly dealing with my blood, there's actually a new treatment I'm considering that I send my blood into a lab and they do like some modification stuff and it whatever they send it back and then it prevents the pathogens from growing. I don't know how it works. I have a lot to learn. I'm still trying to figure out whether this is something I'm comfortable with, but that treatment aligns with, the medicine and me having the same significator and also being in a water sign. So, very, very interesting how all of this kind of fits together. I have also found remedies that are suspended in liquid that I take orally are more effective. So, like the Cowden protocol has been highly effective, much more so than like my dry herbs that I, swallow in capsules. I will say one more thing about this too. So, me and the medicine have the same significator. The interesting part about that, so before I took my blood test, I had to cease all antimicrobial treatments for 3 days. And I didn't know if I was going to make it through that. But they said I could take as many immune supporting substances as long as they don't directly kill the pathogens as I needed to. And so I did. So I increased my adaptogenic herbs, I increased my ozone treatments, my vitamin C. I had to stop taking antibiotics, I had to stop taking antivirals, but I held up surprisingly well. And the fact that this the significator of the first house, me, my significator, and the significator of the medicine are the same planet, and they're in a water sign, and that planet rules blood inside the body, tells me that my own immune system is going to be, at the end of the day, is going to be the number one thing that helps me. And I have found that to be true throughout the course of my treatment. Anything I can do to support my immune system tends to go a lot further than direct antibiotics, direct antivirals, like all the different things I'm taking wouldn't do as much for me if I wasn't supporting my immune system. So I find all of that very interesting. And it's kind of fun how I can dig into this is all just like what came to me as just generally astrologically as I was looking at this chart. And I'm going to get into more of the like actual medical rule sets that Lily has. But this is all just what like came to me when I was first looking at the chart. Okay, continuing on. So the moon in any horary reading is always the co-significator of the querent or the native. So that would be me. The moon is my co-significator. And Lily goes into a lot of different details about the meaning of the moon in a chart, which we'll get into later. But the first thing that I notice is that the moon is applying to a square of Mars and the sun. She's not quite squaring Mercury yet, but it's close enough. Um, so the moon's afflicted. So what does that mean? The moon is afflicted by a malefic planet. That's bad. And she also has reception with Mars. So she has to receive the infection and the fevers. The sun is exalted in Aries. Mars rules Aries. The sun is exalted in Aries. So whatever this square signifies, the moon has to receive. These are both airborne infections. Well, this is airborne infections, and this is the signifier of the illness. Because at first, when I looked at this, I was like, well, my significator doesn't have any aspect to the illness and doesn't have any aspect to either malefic. So, like, am I good? No, because my co-significator is applying to a square of both the significator of the illness and the natural significator of fevers, aka infections. Great. And she's in Aries, which is a sign that both Mars and the sun have essential dignity rulerships in. So, in the short term, the moon is the fastest moving planet, right? So we're going to think in terms of days, weeks, and maybe months when we're predicting the timeline for this next part. So the moon is 3 degrees, 3.5 degrees away from applying to a square of Mars, who, oh, by the way, happens to be the significator of the house of death. What does that mean? 3.5 days, 3.5 weeks, or 3.5 months after I ask this question, I will have a close brush with death. Great. Yay. And I can say the reason I asked this question is because I was afraid I was going to die. And we'll get into the specific rule sets around all this shortly when we get into Christian astrology. But that was a fun little thing when I looked at this. I'm like, oh God, I hope I make it. I will say though, so if we take a very conservative view and say 3.5 months, which isn't likely because the moon's in a cardinal sign and she's the moon. But she does move into a fixed sign, and Mars and the sun are both in fixed signs, meaning longer period of time, whereas Aries is cardinal, so that's going to be a shorter period of time. So like that's days versus months, right? 3.5 days afterwards, that gets us to January 28th, 29th. Okay, that's passed. I'm still alive. 3.5 weeks, that gets us to mid to late February 2026. Okay, that's passed. I'm still alive. And that is around the time when things were at their worst. It was right before I started my in-clinic treatments with all my infusions and all the things. February was when I was at my worst. So I'm going to go ahead and reason that this aspect being 3.5 degrees from forming was the 3.5 week marker. But if we're going to be extra conservative and, oh, by the way, the moon's moving into a fixed sign and the significator of death is in a fixed sign. Okay, 3.5 months, like I'm still out of that. It's been over 6 months now since I asked this horary question. So I think I'm out of the woods in terms of, is this going to kill me? It's probably why I finally have the resolve to look at this, but yikes. So I don't think this is going to kill me, but it did come close at one point back in February, is what I would say. I think it was the 3.5 weeks. The other somewhat unsettling part is that Saturn is in the first house, rising. Um, Instead of gesturing into the air, let me circle it with my mouse. The redeeming factor about this is that Saturn is in his terms in Pisces. So when a malefic is essentially dignified, that actually gives them some benefic properties. Saturn is not the ruler of the 6th or the 8th. So I think we're in the clear here. I don't think that Saturn being here in the first house is in any way indicative of me dying. I do think that there's a slight malefic tinge to his presence there because he's the greater malefic and he's the god of death, but he's dignified. He is the slowest moving planet, so I think what this translates to is a slow recovery. However, for purposes of like a horror rereading, we treat Pisces, it's technically a mutable sign, but it is more on the like cardinal side of that scale. So we have the slowest moving planet in a reasonably fast-paced sign. So I'm going to take that as yeah, it's going to take me a while to recover, but it'll go faster than it maybe would for someone else with my same health picture and circumstances. Okay, let's get into William Lilly. What does William Lilly have to say about my situation? So on page 245, he says if the significators, so if the significator of the illness, so we know the significator of the illness is the sun. If the significator of the illness is in an Aries sign, it shows the blood is putrefied or corrupted, which we know I mean, I would say I don't know that I was septic, but this is a systemic issue and they were able to detect. So like when they did my test, it was a blood test. So that makes sense. This next page here, it says, this is on page 248, and the section is called Signs of a Long or Short Sickness. If the sign of the 6th be fixed, expect a long disease. So the sign of the 6th is Leo, which is a fixed sign. So it says expect a long disease. Great. But wait, there's more. It says here, page 252, if the Lord of the 6th be combust or retrograde or in his fall or in his detriment. So we know that the Lord of the 6th is the sun and he is in his detriment. So that's parameter number 1, check. And in the 8th, no. In conjunction, square, or opposition of Saturn or Mars. So he is in conjunction of Mars, but it's separating, so that does make this a little bit weaker. So if he is in detriment, and he is conjunct Mars. You may doubt, and not unjustly, that the disease will never leave the sick party until death. So what is the prognosis that we typically get with chronic Lyme? It's kind of always there. And there's debate in the scientific community about whether it's always there because we don't treat long enough with antibiotics and antivirals and all the things, or if it's just always there because we can't actually get rid of it. And we don't really have an answer to that medically. And this famous astrologer from, what year did he write this? 1602 agrees. If the Lord of the Sixth is in his detriment and conjunct Mars, you may doubt, and not unjustly, that the disease will never leave the sick party until death. Now, the small glimmer of pushback that I'm going to have on that is that this is a separating conjunction. So there might be a chance that I can still get away with this, that I can still get away from this. So I'm going to try. Page 254. When you find there is any reception between the Lord of the Ascendant and the Lord of the Eighth, and neither of them infortuned by the malignant planets. What does this mean? When there's any reception between the Lord of the Ascendant, so who's the Lord of the Ascendant? That's Jupiter. And the Lord of the Eighth, okay, Scorpio, so that's Mars. And neither of them is infortuned by the malignant planets. Okay, is Jupiter conjoining, squaring, or opposing Mars or Saturn? No. Is Mars conjoining, squaring, or opposing Saturn? No. Mars is separating from a 60-degree angle with Saturn, and Jupiter is separating from a 120-degree angle with Saturn. There's no aspects between Mars and Jupiter. Okay. When you find there's any reception between the Lord of the Ascendant and the Lord of the Eighth, and neither of them infortuned by the malignant planets. So we just determined that both Jupiter and Mars are not infortuned by the malignant planets. Now we have to look for reception. When you find there is any reception between the Lord of the Ascendant and the Lord of the Eighth, is there reception? So in my Renaissance astrology classes by Christopher Warnock, we use the Dorothean triplicity rulership. What does that mean? Jupiter is the mixed triplicity ruler of air. He has air triplicity rulership. So Mars is in an air sign, meaning Mars has to receive Jupiter. So we've got both of these parameters here. When you find there is any reception between the Lord of the Ascendant and the Lord of the Eighth, notice Lily doesn't say mutual reception, it's any reception, and neither of them infortunated by the malignant planets, check and check. After desperation, there will be recovery. So we just talked about the 3.5 week thing where I thought I was going to die in February. After desperation, there will be recovery. Yay! Then I continue reading in this paragraph. And I got my hopes up. So also when the Lord of the Ascendant shall happen to be a benevolent planet. Okay, the Lord of the Ascendant is Jupiter. Jupiter is the greater benefic. All right, let's keep going. And planted in the 1st, 10th, 11th, 5th, or 3rd house. Ooh, look, Jupiter is a benefic planet and he's in the 5th house. Woohoo! So also when the Lord of the Ascendant shall happen to be a benevolent planet and planted in the 1st, 10th, 11th, 5th, or 3rd house, being no ways endangered by the square or opposition configuration of the malevolence. So check, check, check. We checked all that earlier. What does that mean? Well, I got my hopes up. But you know, I'll take this. It prenotes sanity. I was hoping it would say a full recovery, but it didn't. But at least I'm sane. Thank you, William Lilly. Thank you. I was very worried about that. So this was the part when I was talking about the moon earlier, when I said we would circle back to what William Lilly says. This is on page 256. It says, if the moon being in any manner of way corrupt, it denotes death. So the moon is afflicted by applying to a square of Mars and the sun and Mercury. That's an affliction. The moon being any manner of way corrupt denotes death. And that's why I was saying on the timeline, right? When we're talking about the moon, we're talking about a movable sign, which is Aries is a movable sign. I am thinking in terms of days and weeks, but that's why I also put the conservative estimate in there of months. I'm past that time window. So I think that there was a real threat of death there. Like that's like validating for what I just went through. But I think in terms of like the threat of death, I don't think that that is still looming over me. Thank the gods. It says the moon transferring the light and influence of the Lord of the Ascendant to the Lord of the Eighth brings usually death. So we have the moon in Aries. She's actually separating from a square with Jupiter, and she's applying to a square with Mars, who is the eighth house significator. So the moon is translating the light and influence of the Lord of the Ascendant to the Lord of the Eighth. Usually brings death. I guess I got lucky. Yay. All right, a few more. I can remember which page I was looking at. Oh, yes, it was this one. So, page 263, it says, when you find the Lord of the sixth unfortunate or afflicted above the earth, that is in the 12th, 11th, 10th, 9th, 8th, or 7th houses, the disease is in the right side of the body and in the upper part thereof. Interesting. I was bitten on my right arm, which is in the upper part of the body, right? You can see that the sun, the signifier of the illness, is above the horizon in the 11th house. And I was bitten in the right arm, and this disease has primarily affected my brain, my ears, and my spine. And my arm hurts like crazy. And so does my head, but I found that one really interesting because that was spot on. And then I read like some of these other ones. Um, if the significator of the disease be in a feminine sign and an aspect to a feminine planet in a feminine sign or house, the disease is in the left side of the body, which you can see sun is in an air sign, which is a masculine sign. So and it's not in the left side of my body. So it's interesting how all these things are lining up. Okay. So this next part says, this is page 264, wherefore in giving judgment herein you may consider if the ascendant sun and moon be all vitiated or afflicted, the disease is then through the whole body or no place is free. That's what I was saying earlier, that it's systemic and it's detectable in my blood. It's not a localized infection. So we can see, is the ascendant afflicted? Yes. The ascendant ruler is Jupiter, and Jupiter is retrograde, which is an affliction. Is the sun afflicted? Oh my God, I'm so dizzy right now. Is the sun afflicted? Yes, the sun is afflicted. The sun is in the sign of his detriment. And the moon. Is the moon afflicted? Yes, the moon is applying to a square of of Mars, the sun, and Mercury. That's an affliction. So all three of them are afflicted. So it says, wherefore in giving judgment herein you may consider if the ascendant sun and moon be all afflicted, the disease is then through the whole body, or no place is free. Great. You thought I was gonna give good news, huh? No. No, real astrology doesn't always have good news. And then this section was interesting. So William Lilly included an excerpt from Hermes Trismegistus. So I'm on page 277 of William Lilly, Christian Astrology. And this is regarding the sun in Aries in square opposition or conjunction of Mars, which in this case, the moon is in Aries and she's applying to a square of Mars. It says, who falls sick when the moon is in conjunction square or opposition of Mars in Aries, their disease shall proceed from a distempered affection of the membranes of the brain. So I have had um, encephalitis since November. Great. Um, continual fevers, no rest or quietness, and hot, thirsty mouth, extreme thirst, dryness of the tongue, hot liver or inflammation thereof, much heat in the breast, high, and I don't know what that word is, some kind of palsies, which makes sense. Keeping no order. A frenzy may be feared or deprivation of the senses. Letting of blood and such things as do cool and nourish are very helpful, which, we don't do bloodletting anymore, but I guess the idea of it makes sense. If your blood is full of pathogens and you let some of it out, I guess that would maybe provide relief. I don't know, but I'm not doing that. I don't want to be that weak. Um, but a lot of these symptoms kind of apply to what I've been experiencing. So that was what I wanted to go through. William Lilly, you can see all my little bookmarks, my little magnetic bookmarks. So as an overall, I think there's definitely hope for recovery. I'm trying to ascertain the amount of time that's going to take. Am I going to have Lyme for the rest of my life? There's probably going to be Borrelia in my body for the rest of my life. Like, it's indicated there, it's indicated by medical science, but these things can be controlled and managed. And I do think that I can make a meaningful recovery. I've started to get glimpses of that. And so now I want to talk about it. There's no like technique that I've been taught for doing this. So I'm almost like kind of just trying to do a mathematical extrapolation of what to expect. But I will point out here, why am I pointing with my pen? I will point out here that the ascendant significator is retrograde. And that's also the significator of the medicine. So 18 Cancer, 7. And Jupiter is the second slowest planet. So we're talking either months or years. But Jupiter is in a cardinal movable sign. So that's going to go faster. That's not a fixed sign. Movable is the opposite of fixed. So I'm inclined to say it's months that I need to use, but I have to calculate. So the known piece of this timing estimate is that you calculate when a planet is retrograde, you calculate the position that they're at in the chart and you compare it to where they're at second station. So second station of Jupiter's retrograde takes him all the way back to 15 degrees, 5 minutes Cancer. So we're just going to say we're going to round down to an even 3 degrees. So this retrograde period represents approximately 3 months or 3 years, which I think it's 3 months based on what I've experienced so far. This retrograde period represents approximately 3 months of the recovery, which is where things are just kind of like getting worse and it's not getting better, and I'm trying, but I'm kind of a hamster in a wheel, and I'm not moving forward, and this is just terrible. And I can say that makes sense to me in hindsight, the 3 month period. So if I ask this question on January 25th, 1 month takes us to February 25th, 2 months takes us to March 25th, 3 months takes us to April 25th. I went on a first date in May. So I was feeling well enough to go out and have fun and meet somebody new by May, which is approximately 3 months after this question. So I'm going to go ahead and err on the side of not conservatism in saying this is probably months, not years. I'm going to keep my fingers and toes crossed for that. I really hope that I'm right. So then this is where it gets dicey because I don't know how to calculate the amount of time for a planet at second station when they're not moving. So when a planet finishes their retrograde phase, they kind of like stand still-ish for a little while. When they do start moving forward again, it is slower than their average mean motion. It's slower than what they usually move. So if I just math my way through this, and I say from January 25th until March 10th, it's approximately a month and a half, is this retrograde period. And that I can somewhat confidently ascertain that that 1.5 retrograde period, 1.5 month retrograde period, represented approximately 3 months worth of recovery for me. So 3 months, okay. So then that takes us to the beginning of May. Then about from March 11th to April 2nd, Jupiter is moving forward, but he's not moving forward at full speed. He is slow. So that's approximately 3 weeks, which is about half of that retrograde period. So if that retrograde period of 1.5 months took 3 months in real life of recovery, I'm just using like mathematical extrapolation here. I'm going to guess this 3 week period maybe represents another month and a half of like, it's not getting worse, but it's not getting better, or it's barely getting better. So that would take me to about mid-June from where I was at, where we left off in our April 25th was where we left off. And actually, ironically, you can see Jupiter is at 18 degrees, 7 minutes Cancer as of the horary reading. And then when we get to April 25th, which is about exactly 3 months later, Jupiter is now at 18 degrees, 8 minutes Cancer again, but going forward. So on the 25th, and he's moving like more than full speed ahead by this point, but by April 25th, I am starting to see a little bit of forward motion with this. But I would say that it's 11:11. Yay. I would say that it's about mid-June before I start feeling like any kind of real consistent improvement. And that was when I was able to start slowing down on my like in-clinic visits. So if I were to continue to extrapolate this, so if we have, I'm just going to stop sharing for a second so that I don't show my location. But if I were to continue to extrapolate this going forward from April 2nd, which is when Jupiter actually starts moving full speed forward. Ooh, oops, I changed the wrong chart. That was not great on my part. Okay, let's just try April 2nd here. Okay. I think you can see that now. So on April 2nd, when Jupiter resumes full speed, so we're going to count from approximately June 15th going forward. When Jupiter resumes full speed, is about a degree because it's almost a degree. It's like 47 minutes. So that's another 3 to 4 weeks. And then for Jupiter to get back to where he was on April 25th, which is another 2.5 degrees forward, I'm going to add another 3 months after that midpoint in June when the stagnancy kind of stops, but in the progress starts to speed up the same way Jupiter is speeding up. And I think that by mid-September, I will start to see a real improvement in my symptoms, like more good days than not, and not being symptomatic like I am right now. I'm still actively symptomatic. So I think mid-September is when I'm going to start more consistently feeling like myself. I think that there's going to be a long-term recovery that goes with this. But I think mid-September will show very significant improvements over what I've been currently experiencing. And I can say that that has happened some for me, but I definitely have a ways to go. So that's not a very conservative estimate. I guess we'll see how this goes. Um, we'll find out if I'm right. All right. Well, thanks for watching. I'm going to post this on my predictions page and keep your eyes peeled for the resolution. Thanks for watching.